You know, we have some interesting new poll numbers for President Biden and the Democrats with just over a month to go until these midterm elections. The latest NPR Marist national poll finds the president's approval rating is up to 44%, the third straight month of improvement. That's good news for the Democrats. The bad news, though, 7 in 10 people think the country is headed in the wrong direction. As for the top issues for voters, inflation continues to top the list. Joining us now, the chair of the DCCC, Democratic Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney of New York. President Biden will be visiting your district this afternoon. And Joe, the big question for the Democrats like Sean is, especially with the OPEC news and potentially gas prices and everything going up again, that could definitely be challenging for Democrats.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And Sean, I'm curious about a trend that we're starting to see in Senate races. A New York Times report about the Wisconsin Senate race that's gotten incredibly tight. Things that the Democratic candidate said in Wisconsin, just like the Democratic candidate said in Pennsylvania a few years back about crime and, quote, defunding the police. Those exact words weren't used. But you saw firsthand in 2020 that down the stretch, that actually kept a lot of races a lot closer. The whole Democrat soft on crime argument from Republicans in the closing months. Of course, we understand, and we say it here all the time. You know, you can't be for beating the hell out of the cops, and you can't be for terrorizing FBI agents and their families and defunding the FBI and being pro-cop. But that, of course, doesn't stop shameless politicians from going back to that argument. So my question for you, and I know a lot of Democrats are asking this in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania across the nation, what's the Democratic response to that? Democrats are soft on crime. What's the response?
Well, the talk is cheap, and we're going to fix these problems. The other side is seeking to exploit them for their own political power. We just passed out of the House a major local police funding bill that will provide assistance to police departments under 125 officers. That's every police department in my congressional district. Of course, we're the only party that supported law enforcement when we passed the rescue plan, which was $300 billion to local governments. That means every county, every town, every city and village in my district got help. That's what kept our first responders, cops, firefighters, healthcare workers on the jobs. So talk is cheap. But we know we have to take these lies and distortions seriously. That's the lesson from 2020. We're going to do it.
That really is for people watching going, with you, why are you asking that? Because you're right. The lessons, question is, were lessons learned from 2020? Sounds like, again, there are a lot of those policies that all Republicans voted against that obviously can be pushed right back at them. Let's talk about inflation. We were talking about the Saudis jacking the price up, OPEC jacking the price up of oil, despite the fact it's been gas prices have been coming down, and they're not going to go back up to where they were before. Still, though, I know you've seen it in internal polling. I know all Democrats have seen it. Americans, yes, a lot of Americans really upset about the abortion ruling. A lot of Americans upset about democracy, upset about the denial of fair and free elections by a lot of Trumpists. That said, inflation is still, I'm sure in your district, a top issue as well. What's the Democratic answer to inflation, a runaway inflation?
Well, again, we're working the problem. They're working on their own power. Look, we don't disagree with the other side on lowering people's costs. What we disagree on is when we have a plan to bring down your prescription drug costs, which we passed into law, capping seniors' out-of-pocket costs at $2,000 a year. All of the Republicans voted against it. When we have a plan to cap your child care costs at 7% of your income, the Republicans opposed us. And on gas prices, the president has released 90 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We're going after the big oil companies for price gouging, and we're increasing domestic and international supplies. Now, that's a plan. The other side is trying to exploit these frustrations. But look, at what we disagree on is also your reproductive freedom. So while we agree that prices are too high and we need to do something about it, the fact is the Republicans disagree that you should make personal health care decisions for yourself and have ripped away 50 years of reproductive freedom. And that is motivating voters all over the country. And if you don't believe me, I'd like you to meet Congressman Pat Ryan and Congresswoman Mary Peltola.
So right on that line, Congressman, with abortion, and the poll we just showed from NPR and PBS, is immigration. This fiscal year, 2 million border arrests, by far a record in the history of this country. Do you agree that there's a crisis at the border? And if so, what should be done differently by this administration?
Again, we've got a plan to fix the border. We've had one for years. And we would start with helping dreamers, temporary protected status individuals, and farm workers, which is bipartisan, by the way, have legal status here in the United States. We would also enforce our asylum laws. We wouldn't put, moms and kids on a plane and send them to Martha's Vineyard, exploiting human beings for some political stunt. We take our laws seriously. People who come here legally and claim asylum have a right to have that adjudicated before a judge. So we can obey our laws and enforce the border. Again, we don't disagree that we need a border that is under control and where we follow our laws. What we disagree on is exploiting human beings for political gain.
So what's going on at the border in your assessment then, Congressman? With 2 million arrests at the border, what's happening down there?
Well, what's clearly going on is that we've got a broken immigration system, and Democrats have had a plan to fix that for years. But the Republicans have opposed us every step of the way and have sought to exploit the issue for political power. What is going on in recent times is that we had to close the border for the pandemic. That has created a backlog of asylum cases and others seeking legal entry or at least legal process. We have a surge in drug trafficking that we have to combat, and that's creating violence, particularly around the fentanyl trade. But none of these are new problems. These are issues we have seen for years, and we have to enforce our laws, including our asylum laws. We have to get control of the border, but we can respect human beings, my goodness, and we can avoid the kind of political stunts that we saw the Republicans engage in. But can I tell you something? Right now, when the Republicans have litigated this issue in places like the Hudson Valley, where today with the president, we're announcing thousands and thousands of good manufacturing jobs and more than $100 billion invested through the CHIPS and Science Act in American jobs. When they try to litigate this issue against, say, reproductive freedom, political freedom, Pat Ryan won and their candidate lost.
Congressman, good morning. We are now just 5 weeks or so from Election Day, and the DCCC, the organization you chair, received a lot of attention this primary season, including some criticism from Democrats for funding some Republican candidates, extreme Republican candidates, under the theory that they might be easier to beat in November. Some in your own party criticized that, saying that's too risky, that we might give them a chance to win, and it looks like we're promoting candidates who are anti-democracy. As we stand now, the stretch run upon us. Do you defend that decision? Do you think it's a bet that's paying off?
Mr. Lemire, you just said, and I have enormous respect for you, but you just said that we funded Republican candidates. That is flat out wrong. We attacked a single Republican candidate with a general election ad that we ran 2 weeks early. And right now, Hillary Scholten is leading in the polls by double digits. She's going to beat John Gibbs. And that is a loss for Kevin McCarthy and the MAGA movement that wants to take away our reproductive freedom nationwide. So in a budget of over $300 million, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee invested $400,000 attacking a single Republican primary candidate with a general election ad a little bit early. So I don't know whatever the Senate's done or the governor's done. I understand people have concerns about this, and there are always difficult moral and philosophical questions in politics. That's fair. But let's put it in some context. My goodness.
Well, let's go a little further on that then. This is still something that you just explained what your organization did. There are some Democrats, though, who feel like the candidate who benefited from this, is someone who is a danger to democracy. And I understand, obviously, we were talking earlier in the show about parties that are making choices to back someone who is clearly unfit for office, in their estimation. We talked about Herschel Walker earlier. Do the risks, just writ large, for our democracy right now, do the risks outweigh the rewards here?
Well, I'd say this is a great example of a false equivalence. I mean, if you're going to compare attacking a Republican candidate months ago in a single primary with $400,000 out of a $300 million budget, if you're going to compare that to what's going on right now with Herschel Walker in Georgia, I mean, my goodness, I'll tell you what, we're sitting here 30 days out from a midterm election where our basic reproductive freedoms and political freedoms are on the line, where families like mine that depend on marriage equality aren't going to fit in the MAGA view of America. We're going to go into campaign mode from coast to coast right now. I'm not looking in the rearview mirror at a decision that was made months ago. I'm looking forward through the windshield at holding this majority, and that is the larger moral imperative, so that the people who would have set aside the election, 139 of them were already in Congress on January 6th, and they voted to set aside the election. 75% of the Republican caucus right now supports a nationwide ban on reproductive freedom, abortion. That's the moral imperative to keep those people out of power.